So in today's video, we're going to have a look at the Nextool Flagship Pro. This is the dark version. It comes in two versions cosmetically. You have the dark version, which is a sort of a stone-washed dark, and you also have the silver color version. This is the second generation Nextool Flagship Pro. The original generation was only available in the silver color, and there were one or two other minor differences. In fact, one of the reasons when I bought this one, one of the reasons I bought the dark version was to make certain that I didn't accidentally wind up with a first generation version. Now, as I say, the original version is still available. It's a little bit less expensive. Depending on where you're buying it from and whether you're buying in dollars, euros, or pounds, this is sort of the upper 30s, lower 40s for price. But this one has a couple of things about it that I particularly like, and I was quite happy to spend a little bit of extra to get this one as opposed to the original version, which I consider to be not quite as good value. So it comes in this box, and contained in the box, you have your instruction sheet that shows all the details and the warranty card. This version comes with a sheath, and I particularly wanted the sheath. Held shut by Velcro. It's a good quality Cordura. And in the bottom of this sheath, I've got this. And this is something it also came with, and we'll come back to this in a bit. So we have a couple of interesting things about this particular multi-tool. And one of the things that I particularly like is that all the tools are accessible from the outside, aside from the pliers, which obviously are in the center. So we have, for one hand opening, we have this knife blade. It is a liner lock. And the liner lock has a little nipple there, so it sort of stops there, but a little bit of force gets it past it, but that's a safety feature to prevent you from accidentally closing it on your fingers. It's actually just under the 3-inch or around about that. It's a good knife, not a bad blade, decent steel. Opposite that, you have the saw. Now, this saw does feel a little bit dull compared to some, but I've tested this out on wood, and frankly, it cuts perfectly well. There's nothing I really needed to do with that, and for small bits of sawing, it's perfectly adequate. And again, there's a liner lock, which, by the way, allows you to use the back of the spine with a ferro rod. And again, you have that little nipple, which means it stops there, and you have to give it an extra push. But that is, again, a safety feature to make sure you've got your fingers out of the way when you close it. Now, next to the saw, we have 3 pull-out tools, and each of those have 2 functions. So to begin with, we have this. Now, that is a little inner cutter, which could be used to cut seat belts. It could be used for box opening, or it can be used as a gutting hook. So, and it is actually sharp, so it should work rather nicely. And if we have a look here, get that into focus, perhaps you can see we've got a 2-dimensional Phillips head screwdriver. And I've tested this out on even some quite small Phillips head screws as well as some larger ones, and it works extremely well. So I like that. Next we have the tin opener, and you have a wire stripper there. It's a little unusual in as much as it's not the usual U shape. This is more of a V shape, but that will strip wire very well. And the tin opener is not unlike the Victorinox of the design where you're cutting the tin by moving the tool forward. But there is a small difference, which I'll show you very quickly, between this and the Victorinox, because it does work a little differently. Yes, you have that similar shape, but on the Victorinox, this whole leading edge is sharp. And so it actually will open a tin with very little mess and very little bother. Whereas here, it's pointy, but that is flattened. So that's not a sharp leading edge. As a result, it will open a tin quite adequately, but it will leave something of a jagged edge. So this would not be, in an emergency, I'd happily use this and it would work, but it wouldn't be my first choice for tin opening. And then finally, the last tool here is the bottle opener flathead screwdriver. Pretty standard tool on a lot of folding knives and useful in the usual way. The only other tool on the outside of this is on the same side as the knife, but it's on the opposite edge. And you have this little slit here. And if you pull that out, you have some serious scissors. And these are sprung in the open position. And these are, I would call them shears. Compared to the scissors, I mean, for example, if we compare that, the Victorinox scissors are considered to be very, very good, and the blade is only slightly smaller, but the amount of power you can get with this makes this suitable even for cutting twigs upwards of, well, just over 1/2 centimeter in diameter. So that's quite useful for harvesting wood for a twig stove or kindling. So that's actually quite useful, and for most normal purposes, absolutely fine. I've used a scissor tuning tool on this to see if that would work well with it, and it does. And so that's actually a really useful bit of kit, and I like it. I like it very much. Next, we have the pliers. And oh, actually, before I forget, yes, there is actually a clip here if you want to use that. And also, there is one other little tool on this, which it's so well discreet that you almost don't notice it's there. And that is this little nipple right here. And that's actually a glass breaker for dealing with safety glass. So if you grab this and pound with it, you can break open safety glass, because that little nipple will actually shatter safety glass, which is unusual in as much as it's just a tiny little nipple. This is not one that's going to be, a lot of them have sort of much larger, pointier things which will sort of get in the way of things. And this one is actually very discreet, but it is there. So that's the final external tool. Internally, we have our pliers, which again are sprung and give you a really good grip. You've got needle nose pliers in the front, and you have this rounder section for grabbing a hold of nuts and such. And then you have the two cutting jaws for the wire cutters. And if I close this very carefully, you'll see there's like a little air gap there just before that disappears. Just do this carefully. So that if you are putting a heavier or harder wire in there, or larger wire right at the very back, you'll get some really good wire cutting for that. These are very good wire cutters. Now, the Nextool Flagship Pro first generation had these same wire cutters, but it didn't come with any spares. And here's a pair of spare cutting jaws and screws, so that if these get damaged, yes, you can remove them and replace them, but the difference is with the first generation, these weren't provided. So the ability to replace them when you didn't have replacements made them kind of, might as well not have been replaceable. However, these come with a spare set, so I just keep these folded up in this little Ziploc bag in the bottom of the sheath, and if I ever did manage to damage the wire cutters, I could replace them. Again, these are very good quality pliers. There's no play, there's no give, it's a really well-made tool. And for the price, I know it has slightly fewer tools than some multi-tools, but quite honestly, for most needs, to be fair, multi-tools are always the second best choice. The best choice is always the proper tool for the job. This, if you carry and come across a job where you are not necessarily prepared for it, I really like it. It doesn't have a lot of frivolous nonsense. It's pretty much down to the essentials, and they're well made. So I like it. I consider this to be excellent value for money. Is it the best multi-tool in the world? No, but I don't think there's any specific multi-tool I could point to and say that it is, because everyone's needs are different. But I really like this, and this is one that I would cheerfully pack in my backpack if I'm camping in the woods and I want a decent multi-tool with me for who knows what job might crop up. One other difference, by the way, that's important to mention, the main other difference between this and the first generation, is that this is a liner lock. On the original first generation, there is no liner lock. So if you're buying the Nextool Flagship Pro and you're not buying the second generation, you won't have the liner lock. Incidentally, there is one other bit of tool on this which is worth mentioning, and that is actually on the arm for the shears. And I don't know if you can see it, but we have actually got an inch and centimeter ruler on this. Now on the silver version, that stands out very well, but because they've used gray paint on black stonewash on this tool, you really need some decent light. I think you can actually see it from the camera's actually picking it up. And it can be used and it can potentially be useful, but it's so hard to see. I usually forget that it's there. But there we go. That's the Nextool Flagship Pro in the dark stonewash. This particular piece of kit is currently available from a number of vendors, including AliExpress, which is where I got mine from. Again, price-wise, it's not crazy money, and it is decent quality. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that some of them have, but it has the tools that I think you'd most want to have. I would have preferred it if it had an awl as well. That would have been a very useful tool to have on this. But that aside, I'm not really too worried about it. And to be honest, I always carry my my Swiss Army knife. I always have my Victorinox on me because my everyday carry is that, and that has the oil on it. But obviously, this one has better pliers and a slightly larger, more substantial knife blade on it, and this sort of thing. So, would I recommend it? Highly. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting and enjoyable, and if you like this video, please click like. Please share this video, and if you have any thoughts about this or any experience with this multi-tool or another that you think I should know about, do feel free to leave a comment. I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. And if you're not subscribed already, I would urge you to consider subscribing and click the bell icon so you'll know when our next video drops. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a good one.